Are you saying you forgave them? More than once. And they came back. Same behavior, slightly different packaging. And you forgave them again. Because that's who you are. Because you believed people can change. Because the alternative, that they knew exactly what they were doing, was too uncomfortable to sit with. So you didn't sit with it. You know what they did instead? They noted it. Of course they did. Filed it. Quietly. Every time you said, "It's fine." Every time you swallowed it and moved on. Every time you chose the relationship over the argument. They were watching, weren't they? Think about it. Not learning, not feeling guilty. Watching. See, you thought forgiveness was a reset. A clean slate. Back to zero. You forgave, they apologized, or didn't, and life continued. That's what forgiveness is supposed to do, right? That's not what happened here. The thing is, every time you forgave them, they learned something. Not about remorse. Not about being better. They learned about you. How much you'd absorb. How far the line could move. How long it took you to reach it. And let's just say, you weren't offering mercy. You were handing them a map. And they used it. Do you remember that moment you felt something shift, when you forgave them for something that actually mattered, and they looked at you, said the right thing, and you thought, okay, we're okay, that was the moment. You remember it, don't you? Because something felt different. Not better. Different. And you filed that feeling under, "I'm probably overthinking it." You weren't. So, let's go back to the beginning. See. Before the pattern was obvious. Before you had a name for it. Back when it was just one thing. One small thing that didn't sit right. They said something dismissive. Something that landed wrong and you called it out. Calmly. Reasonably. The way you do when you're not trying to start a fight, you're just saying something felt off. And what did they do? They pushed back. Not aggressively. Not yet, just enough. A slight reframe, "That's not what I meant." Or the classic, "You're too sensitive." Said lightly, almost gently. Like they were doing you a favor by correcting your reaction. Do you remember that? And what did you do? Let me say it out loud. You considered it. Because that's what a reasonable person does. Right? You thought you overreacted. You thought you misread the tone. You gave them the benefit of the doubt, all because you didn't want to be the person who makes everything a problem. And so you let it go. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not obvious. Just a small give. A slight step back from what you knew, you felt. And they noticed. They didn't celebrate it. Didn't push further. Not immediately. They just registered it. The way someone registers a door that opens easier than expected. Filed it, and moved on like nothing happened. Because, let's be honest here, for them, nothing did. You thought the conflict was resolved. They thought the boundary was tested. Those are not the same thing, are they? Look. Here's the thing, it wasn't a big deal at the time. That's what makes it so effective. Small enough that bringing it up again would make you look like you were holding a grudge. Small enough that you doubt yourself trying to explain it to someone else. They just said I was being sensitive. They just reframed what they meant. Right. Just. That word did a lot of work for them. Because minimizing what happened kept you from marking it. And if you don't mark it, you can't track it. And if you can't track it, you can't see the pattern. And without the pattern, it's always just one isolated thing. One comment, one moment, one small push you absorbed and forgot about. Except you didn't fully forget, did you? There was something. A faint signal. The kind your body registers before your brain does. And what did you do? You overrode it. Because you wanted to be fair. Because you didn't want to assume the worst. Because at that point you still believed what was happening in front of you was the whole story. And you know what? It wasn't, it was the first line of a very deliberate chapter. And they'd already started writing. As a matter of fact, then you started changing. Not dramatically, not overnight. Small things. You chose your words more carefully around them. You thought twice before bringing something up. You started running the calculation in your head before you spoke. Is this worth it? Is this the right moment? Will this start something? It wasn't. So, you stayed quiet. In a way, you told yourself that was maturity, picking your battles, being the bigger person. And in any other situation, it would be. But this wasn't about maturity, was it? This was about avoiding a specific reaction from a specific person. That's not growth. That's management. You started managing them, their moods, their triggers, the temperature of every conversation before it even started. You became very good at reading the room. Their room, and adjusting accordingly. And the whole time you thought you were keeping the peace. Here is the thing. You were keeping them comfortable. There's a difference. A significant one. Because peace is mutual. What you were doing was one-sided. You were doing all the adjusting. All the monitoring. All the careful, quiet, exhausting work of making sure nothing tipped over. And they just existed. In the space you kept clearing for them. Without even asking you to. That's the part that stings, doesn't it? Listen, here's what was actually happening. Every time you forgave them, they recalibrated. That's the word. Not reflected. Not felt remorse. Recalibrated. They took what you gave them, your patience, your understanding, your willingness to move on. And they used it to measure exactly how far they could go next time. And next time always came, didn't it? Look, they didn't sit down and plan this. That's not how it works. This isn't about a villain with a spreadsheet. It's quieter than that. More instinctive. They simply learned that certain behaviors had no real consequence with you. That the line you drew would move if they pushed it long enough. That your anger had an expiration date. And let's be honest, yours always did. Because you're not someone who holds grudges. But because you genuinely wanted things to work. Because every time you forgave them you meant it. Completely. You weren't strategic about it, you weren't keeping score. They were. I said I was sorry. Why are you still bringing this up? That's not remorse. That's erasure. They weren't apologizing to make you feel better. They were apologizing to close the file. To reset the clock. To make your memory of what happened inconvenient rather than valid. And it worked, didn't it? Because you're reasonable. Because you don't want to be the person who can't let things go. So you let it go. Again, and the file closed, and they noted that too. Here's the thing, the pattern wasn't in any single thing they did. It was in the repetition. The same behavior. Different timing. Slightly different packaging. Just enough variation that each incident felt isolated. Just different enough that pointing it out felt like an overreaction. That was months ago. That was a completely different situation. You're making it into something it's not. No, you were finally seeing it for what it was. Then again. But by the time you saw it clearly, the pattern was already established. The dynamic was already set. You were already the one who adjusts, absorbs, forgives, moves on. And they were already the one who pushes, watches, learns, recalibrates. And yet you kept showing up. Kept trying. Kept believing the next time would be different. It wasn't different. It was practiced. Because every forgiveness you gave them was information. Every time you said, "It's fine," it told them exactly where the ceiling was. And every time you meant it, every time you genuinely let it go, they pushed the ceiling up just slightly. Slowly enough that you didn't notice. Until one day you looked up and couldn't even remember where it used to be. That's not an accident. That's the whole point. Anyway, now you see it. Not as isolated moments. Not as a rough patch or a personality clash or two people who just couldn't communicate properly. You see it as what it was, a pattern, deliberate, consistent. Built on the one thing you gave freely and they used precisely. Your forgiveness wasn't a virtue to them. It was a variable. Something to test, to measure, to factor into how far they could go and still keep you. And the worst part, the part that's sitting with you right now, is that it worked for as long as it did because you were genuine. You actually meant every time you let it go. You weren't naive, you were real. And real was exactly what they needed to make this work. Be honest, you already knew something was off. Not the full picture, but something. That faint signal you overrode right at the beginning. It never fully disappeared, did it? It just got quieter every time you convinced yourself you were overthinking it. You weren't overthinking it. And you were right. Look, now that you see the mechanism clearly, the testing, the watching, the recalibrating, the situation looks different. Not confusing anymore. Not a gray area, just what it is. What you do with that is yours. You can stay. You can go, you can have a conversation, you can say nothing. But you can't unsee the pattern. And they can't unknow that you've seen it. That changes things. If you decide to.